I'm calling the meeting to order, and I'm going to explain what has happened. We have an individual here who is blatantly violating an order we passed last week. He has come in and he has a dark package, 2 of them, as a matter of fact, one I recognize as a camera bag. He has strapped himself and that item to the chair. I could have easily called 911 and said we have an individual here with an unidentified package who is violating the rule. I did not do that because I prefer to handle it in an appropriate manner, one without having to call in any SWAT teams or any police. I'm not going to do it. However, since he is violating the rule, and he has brought in a bag, taking up 2 chairs and strapped it to himself, obviously an affront to the authority of the Josephine County Board of Commissioners, all 3 of us. And I'm going to tell him this one time, he can either pick that stuff up and move over to the side, or he will be removed. What is your answer, Mr. Matthews? As a child, okay.
So, Madam Chair, I think that's the appropriate thing to do. Is we have to convene, we have to instruct the person, the offense, if it is. It's a non-emergency type of a situation, so there's nothing precluding us from convening and you taking that action. I'm not going to, I don't know if object on the basis of the decision that was made last week. I don't know what's in that, and that's my biggest concern, I guess, if I have one. We've had people who bring things in the past, and it is uncomfortable for people in the audience. It's uncomfortable for me sometimes about what exactly are you carrying into this. We've had people bring in, I think it was a violin case at one point. Rika Brown brought in a black plastic bag with some weeds in it. If you strap to it, I don't think that it's anything that's going to cause harm, but it's up to you, and I'm not going to stand in your way, but it's really important that I think we convene and have those discussions if they are necessary out in public. There's nothing precluding us from doing that. As you said, it's not an emergency issue. You didn't call 911. Just be calm about this. You can handle it in a very open fashion.
Okay. So, we are not going to conduct business until this is resolved. So, Mr. Matthews, you will be asked one more time to move over to the side with your equipment and unstrap it from the chairs.
Do you have a copy of last week's?
Yes.
And then for clarification, your non-answer is your answer?
It's not even collected.
What's the violation?
And handheld audio and or video, recording devices, cameras, and microphones may be used at any location in the meeting venue, provided that such devices do not obstruct or block views in aisles or traffic areas. Such devices may be unattended if placed in locations designated by the presiding officer of the board. 4 stand or tripod mounted audio and or video recording devices, cameras, and microphones may be located only in the rear aisle or on the side aisle at the meeting venue. Such cameras or other devices shall not be left unattended and shall not obstruct or block views or aisle traffic areas. In the 3rd provision, no audio and or video recording devices, cameras, or microphones may be used after the board public meeting is recessed or adjourned unless such operation is consistent with and does not violate applicable laws relating to the unlawful operation of an audio tape recording or audio-visual recording device and is consistent with and does not violate applicable laws regarding an obtaining or interception of communications. That is the whole sum of the order that we signed last week.
So based on that reading, I would say that Mr. Matthews is using a tripod-based camera. I know it's probably a box. Yeah, it's based on something. It's not on the lap. Based on that order, I think he probably is in violation. The camera's not unattended. He's sitting right there. I wonder if there's anything from legal counsel regarding this, or if that's necessary to be able to Madam Chair call him up. I just wonder if the order is defensible, like we're going to, if Mr. Matthews finds that his rights are being violated, if he does file something against the county, what kind of a chance do we have in court to be upheld in the decision to delay the meeting or ask him to be removed?
Well, I think the order is defensible. Mr. Matthews has often filed complaints with Secretary of State or election officials or threaten to sue. Having said that, I would advise the board that before we discuss the legal rights, responsibilities of this board, that we do that in executive session.
Anything further, Commissioners here?
Well, I guess personally, if I could just take a moment, we are conducting business right here. There's been a desire by previous boards in this board to kind of regulate how people have used recording devices in the presence of a quorum of the board. And that's been a challenge for a number of years. What I can say is that we have tried to deal with it, at least diplomatically, within the confines of the regulations that we have on the books, govern the operations of our meetings. But when it gets in the way of conducting business in a timely fashion, this is the second instance where we have spent some time either waiting on officers or some sort of resolution that, by last time's example, there was no resolution that was different than where we started. And I'm fearful that at this time we'll go through the motions of waiting for the officers and try to get compliance. And ultimately, this could take a lot longer than last time, but Mr. Matthews will probably find himself, and Ms. Castanelli and any others who choose to use video taping devices within their rights under even the order, if he wanted to argue that that's not a tripod or what have you. I mean, it's a game that we are playing here, and frankly, I don't know that we're best served by playing it. Just that's my personal opinion, that there will be a continuation of this, and people will find ways to skirt whatever kind of rule that we put into place. Now, when it really does conflict with what it is that we're trying to accomplish here, I'll be wholeheartedly behind it. But right now, what I see it doing is spending 15 minutes on an issue that I don't know is the best interest of everybody in Josephine County. We've got some things to do here today, and that's what I came here to do. And I would be in favor of moving forward in the interim. We work out this non-emergency type of a situation over time, but to try to figure out some way to accommodate everybody's points of concern. That would be my goal. But as I haven't read the very important proclamation that I will read, and it's got a lot of big words, and I just take this time to review it one more time. But that's just my opinion.
Sure. I think part of the difficulty comes as we're trying to apply a ordinance or the interpretation of an ordinance that is person specific. I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to be full of fear because Dale Matthews is here. That's not the purpose of these ordinances or laws. The purpose of those are to set a standard across the board, not person specific. And that's part of the complaint, that it was all person specific. It wasn't person specific, it was project specific. The disruption or the blocking of views or whatever else. So the application, I think, of the ordinance is that is in violation of what that ordinance says. They need to be moved. They can't be sitting. I mean, I don't have a big problem with that. We live in a different age. If there was, using this strictly as an illustrative way, if there were two gentlemen sitting, one in the back and one up here in the front, who looked of a nationality difference than what we normally see in this room, we would all be very concerned if they were carrying in some large box-like bag like that. So let's have the standard, and let's enforce the standard. And we can do that. I don't think any big problem with that.
I, for one, am not going to be racially objective.
I
Commissioner Hick was
Pardon me.
speaking. Commissioner Hick was speaking.
It's amazing to me how election periods bring out vociferous objections. But anyway, that's fine. If you want to attribute that to some racial remark, that's fine. Go for it. You can live with it. That's ridiculous, but that's all right. The point being is that we know Mr. Matthews is not perceived as a threat. As far as I'm concerned, it's not perceived as a threat. But yet, on the other hand, there needs to be some enforcement of these ordinances across the board. Okay, so I don't know what the big problem is. Nobody's restricting anybody's recording, audio recording or videoing. Nobody's restricting that at all. You're more than free to do that. It's just the idea that for the sake of the comfort zone, so to speak, of both people being able to sit at ease and or move down the aisles, that there are certain restrictions. You want video cameras, they go on the side. They don't have the tripods sitting up in front of people on the seat. That's all the purpose of that. So if the difficulty is we have somebody who wants to push the law, and this is the struggle with the written law. You and I know both. You can pass, don't do this, period. And there's going to be 500 applications of what that means. And that's part of the difficulty we have, because common sense is sort of petering out and disappearing. But I don't think there's anybody who has any question about what the purpose of that is, or the implication of that is, or what that means. But okay, so the individual is sitting there, and he can care less what you and I have to think. So okay, now we come down to push gun. Do we push it further? Do we not push it further? You know, I don't. There's not an easy answer. I mean, 150 years ago, these questions were solved rather simply, but they're not solved simply today.
So, as I understood the comment, something to the effect of establishing a policy based on the propensity that there's a chance that someone of a different nationality could come in here with a box, and that would be questionable to some. I, for one, am going to go based on the policy of our county. We're not going to base things based on race, sex, nationality, or creed. I don't establish policies that way. That's not something I'm going to work on. Regardless of whether or not I'm in an election season or not, it will transcend time. But that's not how I am going to operate or establish policies. True, they need to transcend the party's play right now, for sure. I think that I've always tried to manage as chair when I was, regardless of who's talking, what their opinion is. Everybody gets 3 minutes, blah, blah, blah. But it had nothing to do with race as being a possible factor at any point in time. That's just not what we're basing it on. What's in that box? Absolutely. But if we're going to do that, I need to see what is in everybody's purse. It doesn't have to be the size of a box here to be a damaging, a threatening thing. We don't have a metal detector coming into this building. The metal detectors, as I understand, only work sometimes going to any of our courts. This dais is the only one in Josephine County that is of a governing body that I'm aware of. Even Cape Junction, I think, has Kevlar reinforced. And maybe I shouldn't say that, but we don't have officers here. It's the same thing. It doesn't really matter. People know that. They see that. We just don't have those kinds of resources. And so if we're going to go to that extent, then let's go there. Let's talk about it. Let's establish policies that govern whatever it is in that box and everybody else's situation. But let's not just try to do so and use 20 minutes of a previously scheduled an agenda meeting here to do it. That's not a good use of this public's time or mine.
And just for clarification, my son, who is adopted, 47, can't hardly believe that. My son is biracial, and he's Native American as well as white. Our grandson's son, who we took in at about 1 year old, and he's now 22, National Guard. He's biracial. His birth father was African American. So the idea that somehow expressing something, or I much prefer having a timeline that shows itself by what people do rather than what people say. You can, charge me with anything. I mean, my actions demonstrate a different approach. However you want to try to twist things around, that's fine. But I don't have a problem with saying my son, grandson is biracial. He doesn't have a problem with it either. And we raised him his entire life. So somehow that we're supposed to be tiptoe around the obvious is part of the difficulties we have today. But okay, let's work with what we got and try to find a reasonable conclusion. And that presumes you're dealing with reasonable people. And this situation, I don't think that's a reasonable conclusion.
So perhaps, Madam Chair, we should recess until this issue is resolved and you reconvene us.
I'm expecting someone from the city to inform Mr. Matthews that he is in violation of the rules. And I'd just like to ask Mr. Matthews, he comes here week after week, is there anything this Board of County Commissioners could do to make you comply like everybody else complies with the rules of Josephine County? I would hope there would be. I understood you having very problem and told you have some. Your muteness tells me everything. So I'm going to proceed with the meeting, but I'm going to make a statement. Anyone who violates the rules and won't play by the rules of the game do not get to play the game. You will not be speaking at this meeting until you comply with the rules. First on the agenda item. Oh, I'm sorry. Pledge allegiance, please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you can afford it.
Once you're here.
We have today item 1A,